Kathy and her best friend went to a fraternity party. At the party, she met her ex-boyfriend, and they had trouble at the bar. The owners kicked them out, and Kathy went back to her dorm. Sadly, Kathy's lifeless body was found in the dormitory later that night. Our first case is about the tragic end of this young girl and the arrest of the perpetrator. We'll also see the pain of an American family who had 2 tragedies in just 90 days. Brace yourselves. We're stepping into the crime scene now. Katie Autry was born in Daviess, Kentucky, on May 10, 1984. Her early life was challenging, partly because her mother, Donnie, struggled with schizophrenia. For the first 10 years, Katie and her mother often had to move, staying with different family members. They stayed briefly at their aunt's house, though circumstances soon forced them to move again. When it was time to pick a college, she wanted to stay close to her foster and biological families, so she chose Western Kentucky University. She and her roommate Danica had a great relationship and often spent time together. Their main pastimes included various campus activities, notably drinking and partying. During college, Katie started to discover her sexuality. She was in a committed relationship with Maurice, whom she trusted. But Maurice had a girlfriend in another city and didn't want to be serious with Katie. In her first year, Katie left the foster care program to be on her own, which meant she lost her scholarship that covered her tuition. To tackle her financial challenges, Katie ventured into dancing as an exotic performer, a decision that came with its own complexities. She started working in entertainment venues like strip clubs, most of which were located off campus. She liked her work. On Saturday, May 3, 2003, Katie and Danica planned to hang out. They hoped to head to the campus and attend a frat party. They had already had quite a bit to drink before the party, so Katie was already intoxicated when they got there. Katie had a tendency to cry when she was drunk, which her friend Danica had to deal with. The party began without any issues, and Katie ran into her boyfriend Maurice. Despite wanting to dance with him, Maurice refused, infuriating Katie and causing a fight. At one point, Katie's anger escalated to a concerning level, leading her to display heightened aggression. The owners of the venue asked Katie to leave, as she was putting everyone's safety at risk. According to the fraternity's code, troublemakers had to be escorted home. Danica, engrossed in the party's atmosphere, was reluctant to leave. As a result, another person was assigned to take care of Katie. After they left, she was accompanied back to her dorm. Shortly after they parted ways, Danica called to make sure Katie had safely returned to her dorm room. Katie picked up, saying she was in her dorm, and even tucked in. But her tone soon changed. She disclosed that an unfamiliar man was in her dorm room, and she was frightened. Danica was worried and needed to talk to the man in the room. He explained that he had escorted Katie to the dormitory because she was too intoxicated to walk, emphasizing his concern for her safety. Danica felt better and spoke to Katie to agree to meet the next morning. Later, the fire alarm sounded at Hugh Poland Hall dormitory, roughly 90 minutes following their conversation. It was common in college dorms for students to play pranks. As some students were still half asleep or intoxicated, they evacuated the building. At first, firefighters treated the alarm with routine caution, suspecting it might be a false alert, as often happened in college dormitories. However, when they went inside to locate the fire, they discovered a burning human body on the bed. They extinguished the flame as swiftly and discovered that it was tragically Katie Autry. She was severely beaten, and her face was covered with a shirt. Furthermore, someone tampered with the room's sprinkler system, wrapping it with a cloth. Katie was assaulted in her room, then set on fire while still breathing. Surprisingly, when firefighters removed Katie from the building, she was still alive and asking to be taken home. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers discovered a can of hairspray in the room, which they believe was used to start the fire. Katie was critically injured and was urgently transported to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. The doctors said her burns were so bad they harmed her nerves. Even though the doctors tried hard to help her, Katie didn't get better and died on Wednesday, May 7, 2003. The police started investigating and asked Katie's good friend Danica some questions. They wanted to know why she wasn't at the dormitory after they both went to the party. Danica said she stayed at a friend's house because the party was going to end late. She talked about the things that happened there, including a man she spoke to on the phone. That man was the same person who had driven Katie home. The police contacted him and brought him to the station for questioning. He was calm and told them he didn't know anything that happened after he left Katie. The police also interrogated Katie's boyfriend Maurice, who presented a reliable alibi for the entirety of that night. The investigation turned its attention to the man who had driven Katie to her dormitory. Later, during further questioning, it was revealed that another person was in the car that night, Stephen Souls from nearby Scottsville. Importantly, Stephen wasn't a student at Western Kentucky University. After Stephen fell asleep in the car from intoxication, Katie and the man who drove them also reached a high level of intoxication. While they were driving, Katie made fun of Stephen for being so drunk. When they arrived at Katie's dorm, Stephen left with the intention of seeing another friend. Within his community, Stephen was perceived as unreliable, frequently skipping school and engaging in marijuana use. Although he never got into serious trouble, his friends didn't trust him much. When questioned by the police, Stephen said that he had gone to the party with his friends and got so drunk that he fell asleep in his friend's car. He recounted that after escorting Katie to her dorm, he departed, leaving her there. At first, Stephen said no to Katie's invite to her dorm, but later he went back on his decision and confessed to sneaking into the building. Eventually, Stephen confessed that he had covertly followed Katie into her dorm and to her room. They were intimate, but he claimed he didn't hurt Katie. However, during questioning, Stephen's story changed, making the police question if they had the right suspect. Stephen said he knew who harmed Katie and identified his friend Lucas Goodrum. When Stephen was in Katie's room, he called Lucas to ask where he was. Lucas forcefully invaded Katie's dorm room and made aggressive, non-consensual attempts at sexual contact. According to Stephen, Katie declined Lucas's advances, and he became angry and assaulted her. Though Katie resisted, Lucas was bigger and stronger and eventually tortured her and set her on fire. Although Lucas Goodrum was only 21 years old and came from a wealthy family, he had no educational background. Lucas was not currently enrolled in any academic institution. While he regularly consumed alcohol and refused to work, his family seemed indifferent to his behavior. Although he was married at a young age and has a young son, he separated from his ex-wife due to severe differences. The day before Katie was attacked, Lucas was arrested for beating his girlfriend at her house. During the questioning, Lucas admitted to seeing Katie at the party, but he denied going to her dorm room and claimed he was somewhere else during the dorm fire. Lucas also denied making the phone call referenced by Stephen. Lucas's alibis were solidified by his father and stepmother's testimony, confirming he was at home during the time of the fire. Lucas Goodrum consistently asserted his innocence regarding Katie's murder. The detectives, viewing Lucas's violent past, thought that Stephen may have made up his story regarding the night of the murder, but did not want to make any mistakes, as they were sure that either of the two was responsible. In an unexpected decision, Stephen Soules and Lucas Goodrum were both taken into custody and jailed for committing the deadly murder of Katie Autry. During the investigation, detectives were informed by the crime lab that samples taken from Katie's body contained semen that was a match to Stephen Soules, despite efforts to burn the body and destroy evidence. Interestingly, there was no presence of Lucas's DNA on Katie's body. As a result, Stephen confessed to attacking Katie after Lucas allegedly already assaulted her. Stephen claimed that Lucas raped Katie and then threatened him. Due to the lack of substantial evidence against Lucas, the authorities faced significant challenges in securing a conviction. Faced with evidentiary challenges, the authorities extended a plea deal to Stephen as a strategic resolution to their predicament. Stephen agreed to plead guilty to murder, rape, arson, and theft, which prevented a death sentence. However, the condition was that he had to give testimony against Lucas Goodrum. In court, Stephen altered his story again. In his testimony, he stated that Lucas Goodrum was the one who attacked, beat, and raped Katie. He changed his statement, now claiming he set Katie on fire following Lucas's orders and threats, a stark contrast to his earlier claim that Lucas was the perpetrator. Contrary to Stephen's accusations, Lucas maintained a solid alibi for the night and consistently denied any involvement in the incident. Crucially, Lucas's DNA was not detected at the crime scene, leaving a notable absence of concrete evidence to link him to the crime. Nevertheless, a claim emerged from a fellow inmate who was incarcerated alongside Lucas, alleging that Lucas had confessed to the crime during their incarceration. However, the jury did not find this testimony sufficient. As a result, Lucas Goodrum was acquitted of Katie's murder and released. Several years after the trial, Lucas was charged with making threats of domestic violence against his ex-wife. In the wake of these charges, Lucas moved to Texas and subsequently faded from the public eye. Stephen Soules received a life sentence with no chance of parole for his role in the heinous and brutal crime committed against Katie Autry. Before we dive into our next story, if you could take a moment to hit that like button, it would mean the world to us. A single click for you is a huge boost of encouragement for us. Christina McCartney was born in Osgood, Indiana. She lived with her 3 kids, her partner, and his son. Her oldest child, Nickalas, was 12 years old in 2016. Her sisters, Desiree and Abigail McCartney, were small children. After separating from her husband, Christina met Stephen Ritz. Nathaniel, Stephen's ex-girlfriend's child, was born on August 4, 2016. Stephen, along with Christina, took care of Nathaniel. Often, Nickalas had to take care of his younger siblings and do chores around the house. He was having a hard time at school and failing most of his classes. His mother thought the school wasn't providing enough personalized education. On May 1, 2017, they left the 3 young children under Nickalas's supervision and left the house. When they came back that evening, they found the kids weeping in the living room, and Desiree was nowhere to be found. Nickalas cried as he told them how Desiree got sick and vomited twice in the bathtub. He stepped away to get a baby wipe to clean her up, but when he came back, she was floating in the tub. They called for emergency services, and Desiree was rushed to the hospital. An investigation was initiated, and the police took statements from the family. At first, Stephen said he performed CPR on her, but later admitted that it was a lie since he didn't. Christina said she did CPR while she waited for the ambulance. The medical team succeeded in restoring 2-year-old Desiree's heartbeat. However, Desiree remained in intensive care for 5 days, breathing using machines. Tragically, Desiree passed away. The autopsy showed no infection that could have caused her death. This indicated that Desiree did not drown. There were no structural abnormalities or injuries, and her lungs had no water. Despite the uncertainty surrounding her cause of death, a distressing incident several months later once again led to emergency services being called to the Ritz family home. This time, it was for Nathaniel Ritz, an 11-month-old, who was found unresponsive and not breathing. As per the physician's report, Nathaniel had ceased breathing half an hour prior to the 911 call. In the early hours of the morning, medical staff pronounced the infant dead. This marked the second infant fatality within months, and law enforcement were notified of both incidents. Following these incidents, Child Protective Services intervened, removing Abigail and Nickalas from the house. When questioned by officials, Christina described what had happened on July 20th. They were watching TV at home with the kids and her boyfriend when, around 11 p.m., she requested that Nickalas put Nathaniel to sleep. Shortly thereafter, Nickalas came back in a panic, saying his sibling was unresponsive and turning blue. Christina then contacted 911. Nathaniel's autopsy revealed no indications of injury or infection, similar to Desiree's situation. The cause of his death was indeterminate, and although prenatal exposure to methamphetamine was speculated, there is no evidence to support it. No suspects have been identified. Nickalas moved in with his uncle, and his strange behavior immediately caught the attention of his family. He deliberately injured a kitten by squeezing it excessively hard during a visit to his great-aunt. When questioned, he told his family that the kitten had scratched him, and he reacted out of anger. Later on, Nickalas told his great-aunt that he needed to reveal something important to her. He then confessed to her that he was responsible for the deaths of his siblings. Horrified by his confession, his great-aunt swiftly reported the incident to the police. Detectives and psychologists looked into Desiree and Nathaniel's murders, asked Nickalas to tell the truth, and he gave them alarming details. The night he killed Desiree, he put a towel over her head and pressed it down until she stopped moving and turned blue. He then approached his siblings, feigning innocence and crying, as if unaware of the tragic act he had just committed. After about 90 days, he went after Nathaniel, using a blanket to cover his head and pressing down until the baby was still. Asked about his motives, he chillingly replied, "They had to be saved from hell and fire chains." He also asserted that he had undergone months of abuse from Stephen Ritz, his mother's partner, and that he wanted to spare his siblings from going through the same horrors. In January 2018, Nickalas received psychiatric care at LaRue Carter Hospital. The prosecution sought to have the case tried in adult court since a life sentence was not an option. The autopsy report ultimately confirmed that both Desiree McCartney and Nathaniel Ritz had tragically died of suffocation. 2 psychologists evaluated whether Nickalas should be tried as an adult or child and determined he was fit to stand trial. Despite the defense's objections and the hiring of an additional psychologist who argued Nickalas was unfit for trial, the jury ultimately convicted him of both murders. The prosecutor showed that the victims were young and vulnerable, while Nickalas did not display any emotion. The defense contended that Nickalas, being just 13 at the time and struggling with mental health issues, was too immature to understand his actions. In February 2022, the 17-year-old Nickalas was waiting for sentencing for killing his 2 younger siblings. The judge sentenced him to 100 years in prison, 50 years for each murder. Christina, Nickalas's mom, thinks he didn't do it and still backs him. She also said her boyfriend, Stefan, could have made Nickalas commit the murders. However, Stefan wasn't charged with anything because there was no proof against him.